people in another group, as opposed to 90 people in one group and only 10 in another group. Second design with only 10 people in one of these dietary groups is not going to give you much information about the risk of developing outcomes when you only have 10 people in that group. That's one reason for going with the random assignment. But by far the biggest reason for going with the random assignment is when you flip a coin, the coin doesn't care whether you're a male or a female. The coin doesn't care whether you're a native Hawaiian or Filipino or Caucasian or whatever your race, ethnicity, status is. When you flip a coin, you would expect just as many men to have their coins show heads as to have their coins show tails. So you'd expect equal number of men in both of your two dietary arms. You'd expect equal number of Native Hawaiians in your two dietary arms. The coin flip balances the type of groups you end up with. It gives you more comparable groups. It tends to avoid the problem of confounding, a topic for next week. So that's the big reason for randomization. We'll talk more about randomization in a few minutes. Is there a problem in this study that people are going to know whether they're eating a diet rich in spam or eating a diet that doesn't have spam in it? Because these people probably know what spam tastes like. They're going to know whether these particles of meat in their diet are spam or not spam. So is knowledge of what treatment arm you're in a problem? It really depends on a couple of things. It depends on your outcomes, and it depends on your compliance. If I know I'm in the spam arm, and if I believe spam is good for me, I might be more likely, when you ask me questions about my physical activity, to answer differently because I know I'm getting the better of the two dietary arms. I'm getting the spam diet. And if I believe spam is good, I might answer your questions differently. If I believe spam was bad for me, I again might be answering your questions differently. So if I know what treatment arm I'm in, and if some of the outcomes are self-reported, somewhat subjective in nature, the knowledge of what treatment arm I am in, and my basic feelings whether that treatment is likely to be beneficial or harmful might influence the way I report these outcomes. So knowledge of what arm I am in could introduce a bias the way people answer your questions. Equally important is, if I believe spam is bad for me, and if I'm in the spam diet, I might decide not to eat my spam. I might eat around it when I'm eating my lunch and eating my breakfast. Or I might decide not to eat in the cafeteria anymore. It could affect my compliance. In a treatment study, where you're giving a person a new treatment, if they know what treatment they're in other words, if you're assigning people either to take an aspirin or not to take an aspirin every day, if you knew you were not in the aspirin group, you were not getting aspirin as your treatment assignment, it might influence what you do with your life. You might go to the drugstore and buy an aspirin on your own and take it every day if you think aspirins are beneficial. Or if you are in the treatment arm that was assigned an aspirin, you think aspirin's causing the stomach problems you have, or it's causing you to bleed every morning when you shave, you might stop taking your aspirin. So knowledge of what treatment you're on can affect outcomes, it can affect compliance. And that's why often we try to hide that information from people. We do what is known as a blinded study. And therefore, hopefully limiting that knowledge from affecting your outcomes and affecting your compliance. And why is compliance important? The last question, what's very important, if treatment has an effect, if no one complies with the treatment, no one eats spam, it's going to be very hard in your study to see a benefit for spam. Because what you're going to end up having is one group assigned to non-spam diet, they're not eating spam. Another group assigned to a spam diet, but they're not eating their spam. So at the end of the day, what are you comparing? Two groups of people. One group not eating spam to another group not eating spam. You're going to find no results from your study to tell you anything about the effect of spam if no one is complying with their assignments. That's why compliance is important. So let's go over these issues again a little bit slower and in the coming slides. First, I'm going to use a study. I'm going to use two studies that Marjorie was involved in. Marjorie won't be with us today, so I'm not going to be able to turn the microphone over to her. This was a non-clinical study. This was not a study done in a hospital setting or a clinic setting. It was a community-based study. Basically, and the other differentiating feature of this was not a study where people were randomized individually into one arm versus another. but entire communities were randomized. Actually, there were only two communities. One on the west, Kahi, I'm not sure how to pronounce this word. I apologize to people in the area. I was expecting Marjorie to be doing this. They received a particular randomization of family support. These were Native Hawaiians, and they were enrolled in an arm of the study where they had the Ohana support, the family support. Another different community received standard of care. And this is what the two arms look like in detail. The one in the Ohana group basically had a member of a family or a close friend acting as a facilitator, coming with the individuals to their training sessions, trying to hopefully improve the compliance of people with the recommendations of that particular group. And the standard of care received many things in common, but you can go through this table and you see the differences in these two groups. So the unit of randomization was not the individual, but the community. One community was assigned to standard of care, the other to this new lifestyle intervention, the Ohana lifestyle, the family member. Nevertheless, individuals themselves were enrolled in the study. Individuals themselves were measured in terms of outcomes. So this is comparing the 72 people who were in the community receiving the novel intervention, the Ohana group, versus 75 different people receiving the standard intervention. And this table gives you an idea of how comparable these two groups are. So just notice, for example, the Ohana group, the average age of the participants was less than 48, 47.9 years of age, versus 3 years older, almost more than 3 years older in the standard of care unit, that was 51. In terms of body mass index, the intervention group was about 2 units higher on the body mass index compared to the standard of care. In terms of percentage of people with diabetes, 41% in one group versus 29% in another group. So keep that in mind for a minute when you think about the comparability of these two groups. In terms of what happened, willingness to change their lifestyle, to have a better lifestyle in terms of diet and exercise. So one thing that was done was to ask people about different stages they were currently at when the study began in terms of changing their lifestyle, changing their diet, changing their exercise, and then whether those stages of change moved during the follow-up of the study. They also asked the people their diet in terms of a physical activity questionnaire and whether they actually did change their exercise habits. So in terms of what they're able to show, one outcome was asking people, did they move along the spectrum of change from going from one of being, say, pre-action or contemplation when the study began to actually changing their lifestyle to be an active stage, or actually beyond that in a maintenance stage where they've actually changed their lifestyle and are maintaining that stage. Well, these are some of her results. This is a result from her abstract itself. It says stages of change was significantly associated with positive dietary and exercise behavior. The native intervention arm were more likely to advance from pre-action to action/maintenance for fat intake and physical activity compared to the group who received just standard intervention. And finally, that was the main result I just want to stress, and participants in the Ohana support group, the intervention group, who advanced from pre-action to action maintenance showed more improvements in actual dietary fat intake and physical activity than those in the standard group. So in Marjorie's paper, which I asked you to read for last week, this is, for example, stages of change in exercise. I love this, that the box to the right are the people in the intervention arm, the box to the here. So notice that there are more people in the Ohana group moving from the contemplation stage to the active maintenance stage compared to people in the standard support. And that general pattern was seen to some extent also when you looked at actual changes in diet or in terms of fat or fiber.